us as sinners is we are everything that God is not. And so it'd be like we're offering up to him a shiny, polished turd and say, accept this as the means of our salvation. And that just, no matter how good I might be, I'm never going to be good enough where I could even begin to merit my own salvation.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 194. We are 6 weeks away from Christmas, folks. Can you believe it? Where in the world did the time go? We're 6 weeks away, and that also means that we're 6 weeks away from our 200th episode. That episode is going to drop on the Sunday before Christmas. I have something special in mind for that show, so be sure to mark that on your calendar. That's the Sunday before Christmas. Should be fun. We also have, in between now and the end of the year, we've got a Thanksgiving special coming. We've got our annual Christmas gift list episode. That'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. And our 200th episode, and then a fifth Sunday special to finish out the year. Today, though, is another of our variety shows with tips from the entire cast. Sergeant Bill is back from the IDPA World Championship and the PCC National Championship in Talladega, Alabama. He's got some thoughts on his experience there. Mia has got, this is an excellent tip, more tips from Mia about hunting in the high country and the warning signs for altitude sickness and how to cope with it, how to prepare yourself for hunting in high altitude, and then another excellent pastoral pontification from Pastor John Bennett to round out the show. All right, well, that's enough for me today. There's plenty of good stuff coming your way, and there's no sense in me delaying it any longer. Thank you for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. So happy to have you here. I hope you enjoy the show. I will talk to you again next week.
You can help support Armed Lutheran Radio just by listening to the show. Go to armedlutheran.us/radio and download the Radio Public app and start listening.
I want to take a minute here to thank our partner, the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you're involved in a situation where you have to use your firearm in self-defense, you very well may find yourself in a legal battle against overzealous prosecutors or the families of the criminal who you shot or threatened, who are looking to deprive you of your freedom or your hard-earned savings. You may find yourself charged with a crime or facing a civil lawsuit even if you did nothing wrong. That's where Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network comes in. For a small yearly fee, they will provide you with money for attorneys, money for bail, consultations, and access to experts like Marty Hayes and Masad Ayub. Don't face the fight alone. Visit Armed Citizens Network today. Use the promo code ARMEDLutheran-25. Save $25 off your first year's membership, or you can grab the coupon on my website, armedlutheran.us. Sign up today. They will send you lots of cool resources, 8 instructional DVDs, and a book by Masad Ayub that I cannot recommend highly enough. Don't wait until you need their help. Be prepared. Sign up today. Visit armedcitizensnetwork.org.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey gun clubbers and everybody else who might be listening today, it's Mia. I'm happy to be chatting with you again. In the last segment that I sent in, I talked about what to expect on your first elk hunt, and I wanted to expand on that. I said I would talk to you guys about altitude sickness, and I wanted to give a little bit of insight on this because I was just in an interview with Strung Out Outdoors, and they kind of laughed because they asked, what am I most afraid of when I'm out hunting or guiding? And really, I'm not afraid of bears, I'm not afraid of elk, I'm not afraid of moose. I'm afraid of somebody that I'm hunting with dying in the woods, because that is not fun. I'm sure you can imagine that would not be any fun. I also recently had our cousin out, and he wanted to elk hunt, and he really is not in the best health. He has asthma, his lungs aren't the best, and he lives at a low elevation, and he came to hunt at over 8,000 feet, almost 9,000 feet. It was really hard on him, and I really was worried the whole entire time that he was here, because I know a lot of times it's true with women, sort of, but maybe not younger men. And I say not younger men because I don't think young men are afraid to complain, but older men, where they have more toughness to them and they don't want to seem wimpy, so they don't want to tell you when something's wrong. And so I don't know if you guys understand what that means, but nowadays, like the younger generation, they complain a lot. So then you have that crying wolf thing where like, well, this is wrong, this is bad. So anyways, I digress. I want to talk to you about altitude sickness, because if you ever come out west to hunt at a high elevation and you're from a lower elevation, I want you to have a fabulous hunt and have fun and have your best opportunity at success. Early symptoms of altitude sickness can feel like the morning after a fun night out drinking. You might begin to get a headache, feel dizzy, you might be nauseous, and a lot of times you don't feel like eating or drinking. Speaking of hangovers and drinking, you should avoid alcohol entirely when you are hunting at higher elevations. Being at a high elevation means thin air and less oxygen. Your body is working harder. It causes you to breathe deeper, which increases your heart rate and your blood pressure. Alcohol additionally increases your blood pressure, plus it contributes to dehydration. Stay hydrated and add nourishment to your list. Get healthy snacks. As you're huffing and puffing to get more oxygen into your bloodstream, you open your mouth to increase your air intake, and this causes you to lose moisture. That moisture escapes from your body, so you have to make yourself drink lots of water, plus you need those healthy snacks. Even though you don't feel like eating, your body is burning a lot of calories. You have to make yourself replace those. I mentioned the symptoms of altitude sickness in everything that I've said so far. Headache, dizziness or nausea, vomiting, a loss of energy, shortness of breath, and a loss of appetite. You need to pay attention to those. All of these symptoms may cause you also to have a hard time sleeping, and that is also a symptom of altitude sickness. If you have the symptoms of altitude sickness, you need to let your body rest. You need to let it heal. You need to let it acclimate. So don't hit the mountain to hunt hard right away. Altitude sickness is caused by thin air and a change in barometric pressure. So if you live near sea level or you at a low elevation, but you plan to hunt over 8,000 feet in elevation, you should arrive a few days early, or at least take a few days to get up to elevation. So maybe head to 4,000 feet, spend a day or two there, and then up to 8,000 feet, and give yourself a couple days before you go hunting. Be kind to yourself and be aware of the symptoms of altitude sickness. Even if you have been to high elevations before and didn't experience altitude sickness, pay attention to them. If you are having any respiratory problems, if you have a cold, stuff like that, you should really be kind to yourself as well, because going up to those high altitudes, that barometric pressure is really going to make those symptoms stronger too. So pay attention to that. Just keep it in mind. I'm not a doctor. You guys all know that, hopefully, that all of you are listening. This is my disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm speaking from experiences that I have had. I'm speaking from what emergency medical people have told me, and I want to share that with you. So if you really, really want facts, contact your doctor before you come up to altitude to make sure you're going to be safe and healthy. But the symptoms that I've described, they're those of mild altitude sickness. So they can be pretty serious, just those mild symptoms. But if you don't pay attention to them, you might end up with higher symptoms. And the first one that I'll mention is high altitude pulmonary edema. And the acronym for that is HAPE, H-A-P-E. This causes like a buildup of fluid in your lungs. And as you can imagine, that is very dangerous and life-threatening. There's also high altitude cerebral edema, HACE or HACE. The word cerebral, that means your head. It's the most severe form of altitude sickness. When a person gets HACE, the fluid builds up within the skull, causing severe pressure on the brain, and this is life-threatening. You need to go get medical attention immediately. I don't know if you're catching on here, but this is a serious thing. People kind of scoff at altitude sickness, but it is serious. The symptoms of these two more severe forms of altitude sickness, HAPE and HACE, the symptoms are confusion, shortness of breath, even when you're resting, which I mentioned you need to give your body some rest, that shortness of breath, inability to walk, a tightness in your chest and in your lungs, and coughing. But additional to coughing, you may be coughing up some type of mucus or fluid. So keep an eye on that. The end result of HACE would be a coma. So I don't know. It's something, like I said, don't take it lightly. Pay attention. Something that we do, we pack oxygen canisters for somebody in case they do get too much shortness of breath. A big thing is if you're experiencing these symptoms, the best and fastest way, as I said, like get up there gradually, let your body acclimate, be nice to yourself. But the best thing to do if you're not feeling any relief from symptoms is go back to a lower elevation. Move back down. We also have, as I said, oxygen canisters. That'll help you so you're not huffing and puffing and breathing so hard, but it's not going to completely stop the symptom. It's just something to help. High mountain hunts, they can be so much fun, and you might even see animals of a lifetime. Here in Colorado, we have mule deer, elk, moose, Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, mountain goats. So you can see so many things, but you want to be able to enjoy that. If you've been on a high mountain hunt, you know the feeling of accomplishment that it can provide. And if you haven't gone on one, it's time to go on one. Give it a try. I hope my altitude sickness post isn't scaring you to death, but stay focused. Train, get in shape. I told you this last time in the last piece that I shared. Get in shape before the hunt so that your body isn't having to work so hard. I mean, just being at a higher elevation is hard on your body. So if you can get in shape ahead of time, you're going to be ahead of the game. If you have more questions about that, as I said, you can contact your physician, but you can also direct message me on social media or give me a shout out over in the Reformation Gun Club. Talk to you next time. Be safe out there. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstein.com.
The Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast is for people who are thinking of getting a gun, and for those who already own one. Each week we invite a firearms instructor to discuss the news. At Self-Defense Gun Stories, we study responsible gun owners who protected themselves and the people they love. Were these gun owners lucky, or were they properly trained and prepared? What would you do if you were in their shoes? What should you do? Come listen at selfdefensegunstories.com.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.Sgt.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Just wanted to give you guys a recap of the IDPA 2019 World Championship and also the PCC, or Pistol Caliber Carbine, Nationals. I went out to Talladega, Alabama, and shot both of these matches, and they were a lot of fun. The stages were easy sometimes and difficult others. The biggest things that I noticed were things I'm going to talk about here. So in a big world championship type match like that, there's always going to be, the positives, the pros. There's all kinds of competition there. There's tons and tons of shooters. They're pulling out all the stops for the different target presentations and stage designs and stuff like that. Many of the stages, they put T-shirts stapled onto the shoulders or clipped onto the shoulders of the target, so they covered the target, which I think is very realistic. which even though some people were complaining about at the beginning of the week, after they shot a little bit and realized it wasn't as difficult as they thought it was going to be, it added a level of realism and made International Defensive Pistol Association shooting what it should be, a defensive scenario-based competition sport. Now on to what I thought were the negatives. When you do stage designs, I don't care if you're just a local club guy that adds a stage into a match, or if you're a club match director and you design all the stages, there are certain things that I really don't think we should be doing. There shouldn't be a lot of non-shooting stuff. Now, I mean, having your wrist tied so that it seems like it's the scenario that it's based upon you being a prisoner, okay, but it's not really a equitable thing for all the shooters. It's not equal. And it's not a shooting challenge. So what's the difference between having a rope tied around your wrists, having to get it off or loosen it, and then get your gun out and start shooting the targets, from just being on your knees turned around with your hands on the ground or on top of your head or something as a start position? Then it's pretty much equal for everyone. And the competition can focus on the shooting challenges. Another bad thing they did was they would have split bays. So the bays were large enough they could do 2 stages on every bay. And they had plenty of staff, which was outstanding. I mean, they had a lot of staff, which was great. It really was. But on several of the bays, they were splitting the bays. So you would have 12 to 16 shooters on your squad, and they would take 4 shooters to start on a stage on the right and 4 shooters to start on the stage on the left, and then everybody else was supposed to tape behind them, which sounds like it's faster, but it's not. It's slower. It's slower because you have less people to tape, or pace targets, or reset. So you have the shooter, the on-deck shooter, whoever's in the hole, plus the shooter that just got done shooting are all occupied. They're not pacing targets, nor should they. You have those 4 or 5 people on both stages from one squad on one bay. My squad had 12 people. That leaves 2 people to paste. And it was crazy. And they were yelling about, we need pasters. And no, you need better match direction. You need to stop doing this stupid stuff that no one could actually prove is actually quicker, because it's not. As a shooter, it's confusing. So being there all week, every morning in my hotel, I got to talk to lots of shooters from all over the place and met lots of neat people, which is really awesome. And the consensus was that the split bays is confusing. So you don't know where you're up. You have to figure out where you are. And half the time you shoot one stage, you go to reload your mags and prepare for your next stage, and you're already on deck on the next one. It's confusing. You have less time to prepare. It makes it slower. And like I said before, you have less time and less people to paste. It's just not the way to do it. They did some of the split bay stuff at Nationals last year, and I thought it was plainly obvious that those bays that split the squads were slower than the other bays. But for whatever reason, several of the bays did that at the World Championship, and they did it in PCC, which was even worse because with the match being so late in the year and with the sun setting so early in Talladega, and they could only start at 9 o'clock, no earlier due to a local law, it made a serious time constraint in doing 16 stages in one day. We all got it in, and I'm pretty sure everybody got done, but it was pretty close to sunset. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're a match director and you're running a match in your local club or a sanctioned match, don't ever run split bays because it doesn't work. Don't run stage designs that are gimmicky, that have non-shooting challenges, because they don't affect the outcome of the shooting equally between the shooters, and it's just not right. It's a shooting sport. Let's keep it that way. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
This is Pastor Brian Wolfmueller of Table Talk Radio. Thank goodness you're listening to the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast.
It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Hello and welcome to Pastoral Pontifications. This is the Pistol Packing Padre, Pastor John Bennett. And today I'm talking about the 25th Sunday after Trinity, also known as the third last Sunday of the church year. And generally speaking, the last 3 Sundays of the church year in the liturgical church calendar have a focus on the end times, which, coincides with the end of the church year. But what the focus is on is the coming Christ, the Christ who comes to redeem his people, Christ who comes to bring his church, gather his church to himself. And it is really a beautiful time of the church year because the readings are focused so much on the hope and comfort and consolation that Christ brings to his people on earth. And the reading that I'm focusing on for my sermon this Sunday, it is Isaiah chapter 49, verses 12 through 17. And this is the appointed Old Testament reading from the historic one-year lectionary as indicated by the Lutheran hymnal, the 1941 edition. Yes, there are people who still use that hymnal, myself included. From Isaiah chapter 49, beginning with verse 12. Surely these shall come from afar. Look, those from the north and the west, and those from the land of Sinim. Sing, O heavens, be joyful, O earth, and break out in singing, O mountains. For the Lord has comforted his people, and will have mercy on his afflicted. But Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, and my Lord has forgotten me. Can a woman forget her nursing child, and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget. Yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Your sons shall make haste. Your destroyers and those who laid you waste shall go away from you. Here ends the reading. Now first, just a general overview. What is going on in this text? Now this text, while we could consider this as messianic prophecy, this falls into that category of passages that speak of both the reality of the coming Messiah that he brings to his people and what our life is like as the children of God. And the text reads much like a conversation between God and his people. And God is speaking of the joy that the coming Messiah brings. Sing, O heavens, be joyful, O earth, break out into singing, O mountains. And then it speaks of God having mercy on his people. But then Zion, which we could apply this to the people of God here in this time, those who believe in Christ Jesus as he who has redeemed us from sin, death, and the devil. But Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, and my Lord has forgotten me. Those are the words that really are going to be the focus of the sermon. But with Zion speaks, God's people. Here, this is talking about Israel, God's chosen people. We apply it as those who believe in the Messiah who has come. Zion is very skeptical when God speaks of the comfort that he's bringing to his people. Again, keep in mind also that Isaiah is writing during a time where God's people are in bondage. Zion, very skeptical of the mercy of God, says, God, we feel like we have been forgotten. We feel like you have forsaken us. So how is it that we can trust in you when you say that you've comforted your people, that you have had mercy on your afflicted? And then God responds, can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. In other words, God is saying, as I provide for you, as I literally give you life, and we have the imagery of a woman and a child, as I literally give you life and provide for you from my bounty, how can I possibly forget you? how can I possibly fail to have compassion on you, my children, those whom I love? Surely they may forget. They here implying God's people. They may forget him. Yet, and this is the promise that God gives, I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Now this here we make a clear application to Christ and the cross, he who was pierced for our transgressions. Your walls are continually before me. Your sons shall make haste. Going back there to your walls are continually before me. God, in other words, is saying, I see the devastation that has befallen you because the walls of Israel have been destroyed. Your sons shall make haste. Your destroyers and those who laid you waste shall go away from you. Your enemies, those who have brought this destruction upon you, shall flee. Now, I wanted to get back to verse 14 and how I'm applying this in the sermon. And I'll also make an application in just a moment to Second Amendment gun rights and that sort of thing. Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me and my Lord has forgotten me. Now, how often do we live our daily lives feeling as if we have been forsaken and forgotten? When we suffer, when we're afflicted, and we can draw a parallel between the last episode in Clinging to God and Guns, when Lori and I talked about people suffering, the problem of suffering. Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Which itself is a terribly flawed question to begin with. But so often we feel forsaken. We look at the world around us, we see the rampant attacks that have come against Christ and his people. And in a way, we do feel forgotten. We see the attacks that come from within society, how we are called hateful and bigots. But the culture itself is constantly attacking the church. We see it from within politics. Beta Male O'Rourke, a.k.a. Roberta, as I call him, thankfully out of the race, although he was great entertainment while he was in there, talked about stripping churches who refuse to bow down to the LGBT agenda and stripping them of their tax-exempt status, which it would terribly cripple most churches, especially those churches that are located within metropolitan areas where the property values are incredibly high. They would be taxed on the basis of the value of their property. And that's one of the points that Beto O'Rourke was running on, stripping us as Christians of our right not only to free speech, but also our right to practice our faith as we see appropriate. Now we can make a correlation with this also just to politics in general and to the Second Amendment. Do we, as advocates of the Second Amendment, as supporters of our gun rights, do we feel forgotten? I know there's many who are dissatisfied with the NRA. The organization itself seems to be deeply corrupt, and many within leadership use it as their personal cash cow and have become quite wealthy off of their salaries. In many ways, the NRA has become so overly political that they've failed to really champion for our Second Amendment rights as they used to. We see how early on after the Las Vegas massacre that the NRA really jumped right out there and said, yes, we will support a ban on these bump stocks, as we normally would call them. We see how politicians have done the same, how we've had guys like Dan Crenshaw who have stood up and said that he would support red flag laws. We feel as if there is no one listening to us and to our concerns, and instead they're simply making public talking points that will gain them a few more votes when it comes to a public election. And in many ways, we feel like we're being taken for granted, especially from the political side of things. Oh, these Christians, these evangelicals, we have their vote anyway, so we're not going to really cater to them. We're going to try and go outside of our party and broaden our base by really, in many ways, spitting in the face of our values. We see this with the Second Amendment, how they say, well, these Second Amendment supporters, they're going to vote Republican anyway, so we can really, weaken and compromise our own position, just so we can get a few more votes from those independents in the middle, and hopefully we'll get the election, and meanwhile they just have spat in the face of supporters of the Second Amendment. Even though we in many ways feel like we have been forsaken and forgotten by our culture, by our politicians and so forth, and even though these are the words that Israel speaks in response to God's promise to have mercy on his afflicted, the Lord has forsaken me and my Lord has forgotten me. May we never be that skeptical, no matter what we are enduring in this life. And frankly, we still have it really darn good in this country. No matter what we are enduring, know that the Lord has not forsaken you, that the Lord sees your afflictions, that the Lord knows your sorrows. To really tie a bow on this, going back to verse 16, it says, "See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands." Really, I wanted to make a connection between those words and Christ, that Christ, his hands, are pierced for us, that he was crucified for you, that he endured death and the grave and all the shame and scorn that comes with the cross for you. You are inscribed on the palms of Jesus' hands. There in his wounds, find your identity and know that the Lord certainly has not forsaken or forgotten you, but that he has given his life for you, and that he is risen again to give you eternal life with him and all the saints in glory. Well, that wraps it up for today. I hope you enjoyed this segment. If you have any questions or feedback that you'd like to provide, you can do so through the Armed Lutheran Radio website at armedlutheran.us. Christ blesses to you, and remember, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.